All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking the unseen reality all around us. Understanding the biblical role of angels. It really isn't just about some abstract theology. It's a profoundly practical truth, and honestly, it brings incredible peace during our daily struggles. If you've ever felt totally isolated in a hardship, or just weighed down by the invisible heaviness of life, getting a grip on this unseen vanguard is absolutely going to shift your perspective.
So what are angels actually doing around believers? For a lot of us, angels kind of just exist out there in the ether, totally removed from our everyday lives. But instead of just viewing them as, distant symbols or pretty characters in old stories, we've got to ask a much more direct question. What are these heavenly beings actively carrying out on Earth right now? Because the source material we're exploring today makes a seriously compelling case that angels are way more active around us than most folks ever realize.
Moving into Section 1, the reality around you and unseen protectors.
It's fascinating when you compare cultural myths with biblical reality. Like, angels are not humans who died and went to heaven. Actually, scratch that. They aren't departed loved ones watching over us either, and they certainly aren't just poetic concepts. Instead, they are this unique, mighty order of created spiritual beings. We're talking exceptionally powerful, highly intelligent, and 100% devoted to executing God's will. Their entire existence is centered on serving the purposes of the kingdom of heaven, which, believe it or not, directly impacts our physical reality right here on Earth.
And when you look at their dynamic assignments, you see they really fall into four main areas: ministry, protection, delivering messages, and spiritual warfare. Angels are definitely not passive observers just sitting around in clouds. They're highly active participants. They minister to believers, they shield and protect, they deliver crucial messages, and man, they engage in intense spiritual warfare in the unseen realm. Recognizing that heaven itself is actively pulling for God's purposes right here on earth, well, it reminds you that the kingdom isn't just carried by our own exhausting earthly labor. You literally have an entire unseen support system operating right alongside you every single day.
We actually see this fierce protection mapped out historically time and time again. Think about it. From an angel literally shutting lions' mouths for Daniel, to angelic armies completely surrounding Elisha when enemy forces approached, or breaking Peter out of a locked prison when escape seemed absolutely impossible. God has countless ways to preserve his people way beyond what our human eyes can see. Now look, this doesn't mean we won't face danger or really tough times, but it does mean there are countless moments, accidents, attacks, disasters, where believers are projected, and we might never even realize the spiritual intervention that just went down on our behalf. Beyond just protection, though, we've got to look at their communication. The very word angel actually translates to messenger. Throughout Scripture, whether they were announcing the birth of Jesus to Mary or guiding Joseph through his dreams, their work always perfectly aligns with God's purposes. And here's a crucial takeaway. Genuine angelic communication will always point people toward obedience to God. It never leads away from his word.
Which brings us to Section 2, Strength in Darkest Hours.
There's this beautiful quote from the book of Hebrews, and honestly, it's a total game changer for coping with our daily struggles. It explicitly calls angels ministering spirits sent forth to serve those who will inherit salvation. Just let that sink in for a second. God intentionally assigns these mighty spirits to serve you. When you're weighed down by life, feeling completely isolated in whatever you're facing, remembering this truth completely shifts your perspective. You have active, heavenly backing.
We can see exactly how this sustaining strength plays out during a crisis by looking at two massive moments in the life of Jesus. First, right after he endured intense temptation in the wilderness, angels came and ministered to him. And second, in the Garden of Gethsemane, right as Christ was preparing for the sheer agony of the cross, an angel appeared specifically to strengthen him. Think about the magnitude of that. If the Son of God received angelic sustenance during his most critical, painful moments, God will absolutely use angelic ministry to give you unexpected peace and supernatural endurance during your own darkest hours. Ever get that overwhelming sense of peace out of nowhere? Well, Scripture shows us that angelic ministry can absolutely be part of God's direct provision for you.
All right, moving on to Section 3, Finding Peace in the Unseen and Keeping Focus on Christ.
Now, here's a crucial point we have to make. Yes, angels are incredibly powerful, but they are never the focus of our faith. Our obsession has to remain fixed on Christ's presence, not on having some sort of angelic encounter. Notice the contrast here. Angels serve, they obey, they worship, and they point to God. Jesus Christ, on the other hand, is the center. He is the one being served and worshiped. The most mature believers, they don't chase after angelic experiences, they chase God's presence. because faithful angels will always, and I mean always, direct our attention completely away from themselves and right back to Jesus.
Understanding this balance deeply transforms our daily prayer routines. When you pray, you aren't just, throwing words at the ceiling. Applying this to your daily life means actively acknowledging realities way beyond human sight. While we simply pray, stand in faith and trust God, whether we're sitting in our living rooms or commuting in our cars, heaven's armies are actively enforcing God's sovereign plan in the spiritual realm. You don't have to face spiritual warfare alone. Heaven's armies are fully active under God's command, ready to back you up.
And you know what? They care deeply about the outcomes of those prayers. Just consider the number 1. That is exactly the number of repenting sinners it takes to cause massive rejoicing and celebration among angels in heaven. They are watching God's redemptive story unfold, and they're so deeply invested in it that heaven literally throws a party over just one transformed life. If that doesn't prove that the spiritual realm is deeply invested in what happens to you on earth, I don't know what does.
Which brings us to our core takeaway for today. The next time you feel totally overwhelmed by your daily struggles, I want you to let this final thought resonate. The visible world is not the only world. You may never see them with your physical eyes or hear their voices, but God is relentlessly working on your behalf, and His angels haven't stopped either. You are never, ever alone. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder as you go about your day. How would your reaction to your current struggles change right now if you could clearly see the unseen vanguard standing right beside you?